Hi, beautiful cherubs. Today we're going to learn about opening paragraphs. And we're not only going to learn about opening paragraphs, we're going to learn about how to beast them because every one of you is capable of that. Opening paragraphs are so important because they are the way that you determine whether your reader will continue reading what you're writing. So if you're not being clear and making it obvious what you're going to say, your reader is probably going to ditch your paper and go read something more easy to understand. So your job is to present your topic and your claim in a way that is succinct and clear and interesting. So we're going to talk about a few steps that you need to take to make that happen. So step 1, you have to come up with a hook related to your topic. Now, hooks are nothing new. You guys have been writing hooks for stories since you were little kids. But when it comes to argument writing, your hooks are a little bit more data related. So one possible hook you might have is that you could provide an interesting statistic that might say something about what you're going to discuss in your paper. For example, if you're writing a paper about how Barbies impact girls' self-esteem, you might say something that like, of the 7,500 women in the state of New Jersey who have owned Barbie dolls in their childhood, 3,000 have had eating disorders in their lifetimes. That's a completely false fact, I made it up. But it's an interesting statistic. If it were real, it would definitely draw the reader in to think, oh wow, more than half people who had Barbie dolls in New Jersey developed eating disorders? Whoa. So you want a statistic that says something really interesting that kind of draws the reader's attention. That's one option. Another possible hook you could use is you could offer a short quote that kind of sums up your argument. Now, if you're going to choose a quote, you have to be very particular and not just choose some random piece of data. It's got to be a quote that really kind of brings your argument home. Even though it's at the beginning of the paper, it's got to be completely relevant and have that kind of bam effect we've talked about, where it really just shows the reader exactly what it is you're trying to communicate. So that's an option. You just have to choose really carefully, and it should not be like a whole paragraph. That would be lame. Your other options, you could also have a rhetorical question, which will get your reader to think about your topic. Now, a rhetorical question is a question that basically doesn't require an answer. It's just a question that asks your reader to think. So you might say something like, it could even be, you could say to your reader, imagine that your childhood consisted mostly of playing with a doll that was the proportions of an unhealthy supermodel. Or you could say something like, what would the world be like if a Barbie doll's body actually reflected the average American female of 2017? That could be a question that just make your reader think and be like, what would it be like if Barbie was a normal size and not completely disproportionate? So that's an option. Another option, you could provide a short anecdote or a personal experience. Now that could be something that you've actually had happen to you, or it could be an anecdote that you read about. But if it's something you read about elsewhere, you have to make sure you cite your source. So for example, you could say something like, let's say you have a sister who was negatively impacted by playing with Barbie dolls. You could say something like, when Caitlin Whalen was little, she frequently spent hours playing with her Barbie dolls, and as a teenager came to believe that Barbie represented the ideal female form. And then you would go on and you could say, well, I'll stop there for now, but that could be a little short anecdote about this girl, Caitlin, who played with Barbies, and that's how she got her idea of what a woman's body should look like. So in class, we're going to talk about if we were writing an essay about drunk driving, and let's say we were claiming that drunk driving needs to be more severely punished. How would you try each of these methods? Try coming up with one of each of these 4 different things: an interesting statistic, a short quote, a rhetorical question, or a short personal experience or anecdote that could introduce the topic of drunk driving and the fact that it needs to be more severely punished. So that's something we'll practice in class. Okay, so that's step 1. You got to come up with an interesting hook. It's got to be relevant, it's got to be interesting, it's got to be awesome. So, step 2. You want to start to zoom in on your claim. So you have a few sentences to work with in between your hook and the actual claim you're making. And that's where you kind of need to narrow down your focus. So basically, you're going to have a transition sentence or a bridge between your hook and the claim itself. Some ways you could do this. You could, for one thing, you could mention why the subject you're writing about is still important or relevant. So if we're talking Barbie again, you might say something like, the impact of Barbie dolls on the not only the toy industry, but also on women's self-esteem cannot be denied. You could say something like that. Or you could say, Barbie dolls have only increased in sales throughout the United States since they were first introduced in 1923 or whatever year. I don't know, I'm making this up. So you want to kind of show why your subject is important. Another option, you could define any content-specific terms. So what I mean by that is you might need to define what a certain specific word means that the everyday reader might not know. For example, if I'm the everyday reader and you're writing about sports and you want to make an argument about capping salaries for pro lacrosse players, you might need to give me a little bit of more data on what exactly lacrosse is like and what professional lacrosse players, what that industry looks like, because I don't even know if that's even a thing. In the case of Barbies, you might want to define, if you were writing it for somebody who doesn't know about Barbies, you might need to explain what a Barbie doll is or what one typically looks like. So you want to kind of assume that your reader doesn't know as much about the topic as you do, and you need to be extra clear. One way to check on this is to have a friend or a friend or a family member read your first few sentences of your essay and ask them if they have any questions about anything. And if they do, you need to make sure you're being clear and explaining the things they're not sure about. Another option is if you used an anecdote, you want to explain why that anecdote pertains to more people than just that one person. So this is pretty important because we've talked about how when you provide a story, it's not always the strongest evidence to use because it's just about one person. But if you can use a story as a bridge into a bigger issue, then it can work. So for example, if we go back to that topic, we say Caitlin played with Barbie dolls for her entire childhood, and when she was in high school, she thought that a Barbie doll's figure represented the perfect female form. Then you could say something like, Caitlin was not alone in having this belief, and it ultimately caused her to suffer greatly in terms of self-esteem. So now we're going from Caitlin to lots of girls like her who had a similar experience. And that's kind of important if you're going to use the anecdote, that you kind of show how it's not just that one example, but it's actually related to lots and lots of people or lots and lots of groups. Step 3, you want to stake your claim. Now we've talked a lot about staking your claim. You should feel pretty comfortable with this. Just remember, a claim should be one sentence. It should be clear and succinct. And succinct means short and to the point, unlike me talking because I tend to ramble. But you want to, with your claim, make it quick and simple, but also make sure you're clear so that the reader has no question of what you're arguing for. If I read your claim and I'm like, what is this person trying to argue, then that's a problem. One thing that I've seen students do in the past is they phrase their claim like a question. Your claim is not a question, it's a statement that you believe to be true. So you don't want to say something like, should school start earlier? No, because that's not a claim. That's just you asking a question and, asking me my opinion. I want you to say, school should start earlier everywhere in the United States. That's a claim. So, when you stake it like you mean it. No confusing pronouns. And no confusing pronouns. By that I mean you don't want to use this or it or that, words like that in a claim, because your claim should be so clear that anybody could read it by itself and be like, all right, I see where this person's coming from. So if you say something like, cigarettes are bad for them, that's not a strong claim. Cigarettes are bad for them, because I don't know who them is, and the word bad is kind of a lame word, so you would want to say something like, cigarettes should be illegal because of how much they damage the health of the elderly. That could be a more specific claim. Okay? So, you definitely don't want to use words like, I think that, or in my opinion, or I believe, because as soon as you do that, I stop listening to you. It's not that I don't care about your opinion, but your opinion is not as valuable to me as the facts you're going to use to convince me of something. So if you just say, I believe, I'm just going to be like, oh, that's nice, so Stephen believes this. That's lovely. It doesn't mean I have to. But if Stephen instead says, this is true, and makes his statement so that I believe it to feel like it's almost a fact, that is a sign of a strong claim. So for example, you might try a few different options. So let's try this one. In my opinion, drunk drivers should be punished more severely. Obviously, that is a lame claim because we don't want to use in my opinion. Nix it. Here's another option. Drunk drivers should be punished for it. For what? That word, it, no go. Last option. Drunk drivers should be punished more severely for their poor choices behind the wheel. Here, I have a succinct, clear sentence. I know exactly what the person is arguing for, and I feel like it's kind of a win. So yay, that's the kind of claim I'm looking for. Step 4, you want to build your roadmap. What's a roadmap do? A roadmap tells you where you are going to go. So when it comes to a roadmap sentence, you're basically telling the reader, this is what I'm going to tell you about in my paper. Now you don't want to write, hi, this is what I'm going to tell you about in my paper. No, don't do that. You want to sound sophisticated because your reader needs to know where you're going so they can follow. So basically a roadmap is going to show the reader the structure of the rest of your paper. So it's a list of the reasons for your argument, but it's written in a nice, lovely sentence. Each reason should correspond to one of your body paragraphs. So if I say something like, I might say something like, among the many reasons that Barbie dolls should be banned from toy stores are its negative impact on women's self-esteem, its extreme expense, and what else could I say? And its gender-specific irrelevance. So I could basically come up with 3 reasons why Barbie dolls should be banned from toy stores, and then I would want to introduce all 3 of those reasons in one sentence. You might say something like, some of the reasons why we should ban Barbie dolls are blank, blank, and blank. Basically, it's going to look like a list or a series. So down below, there's some samples that you can use to try and write a roadmap sentence about more severe punishments for drunk driving, and we're going to practice that in class, but you can certainly practice it at home too. And that's basically where your opening paragraph ends. So you've now got your hook, you've transitioned from that hook and kind of narrowed your focus, then you've given me your claim, and then you've given me your roadmap, and now you're ready to go into your body paragraphs. So at this point, all you have to do is sit back and just be like, wow, I'm awesome, I just wrote an amazing paragraph. But you do, of course, have to edit for grammar and spelling, and if you don't capitalize words, I'm going to be very upset. So once you've gotten to that point, high five yourself, job well done. You have now mastered the art of writing an opening paragraph like a beast. If you have questions, you know where to find me, Tuesday, Thursday, tea time. I'm happy to help you anytime you need me. All right, way to be rock stars.